I hope to build on what has already been said by giving a short presentation with hopefully some time for questions at the end. But let me start with seeing if I can share as I intended to. There we go. I think I have a few too many windows open at the moment. Please. Okay. There we go. Excuse me for that. Okay, so let's begin. So the title I have given myself is the very ambitious title of How to Organize Your Firm to Deliver Sustainable Business. Now, obviously, with so many different kinds of firm and business and enterprise across the world and also across the audience today, we have to be general in order to be useful. So I have organized today's talk into 10 steps. And these 10 steps are typical of the advice that Deloitte gives to our clients when they are considering how to embark on a sustainable journey. And I'll be talking briefly about each one. Firstly, we must understand how the world is changing, the pace, the nature, the scale, and type of change. Secondly, we have to make educated guesses about the future. We cannot wait for the certainty to arrive. Thirdly, we must reconsider how we allocate capital. It's scarce and we must allocate it in appropriate ways. Fourthly, everybody has to participate. Everybody has a role in becoming sustainable in business, and everybody has a different role. We need innovation in products and services. We need to manage multiple stakeholders. We need to rethink what performance means and therefore how to manage it and measure it. We need to tell the outside world a lot more about what's going on inside the company. We need to optimize the governance and how we oversee decision-making. And we need to recharge our workplace culture. And although I'm mostly talking about relatively complicated and large businesses here, the same principles apply in miniature to any enterprise, although you won't perhaps have the full range of bodies and committees. So let's see. The first step, understand how the world is changing. I think institutions and businesses are struggling to keep up with the scale and the pace of change at the moment. The external environment is changing much more quickly than the inside of most organizations, which are relatively slow in comparison. And to give you an example of the pace of change, I'm going to talk about the industry lobby group API, which stands for the American Petroleum Institute. I've been tracking them for the past few months. Okay, in December last year, the API was funding politicians who denied climate change was real. They themselves denied there was a scientific link between greenhouse gases and climate change. They denied, so these API, this is like Total, Shell, BP, Exxon, Chevron. They denied that methane created global warming, and they were simply in denial. In January this year, Total, the French oil giant, left the API. They said, we cannot be a member of an organization that denies climate change and climate science. Then, as we all know, Joe Biden won the US election. He was inaugurated eventually. And a month later, the API decides it believes in climate change. It needs to understand how greenhouse gases can be reduced, and it is in favor of a global price for carbon to drive a market-based approach to climate change. So from denying that it happens to advocating a global carbon price took 3 months for the API, and an entire industry has changed its view. That's how quickly things can change. And by the way, the day after Total left the API, it invested in a 30% stake in the world's fastest growing solar energy company. So things change a lot here. Secondly on the slide, as the outside world changes a lot, the demands on each of us as business people also changes. So the scrutiny from outside stakeholders grows, and the expectations on us to perform and to change are rising. And many firms can't quite yet work out how to react to these new demands for change. And thirdly, the world is changing because organizations, I think, now realize that ESG risks, so environment, social, and governance risks, are big enough to bring down your business if they aren't handled properly. So for all these reasons, I think the first thing that companies need to do is to give the role of understanding to somebody within the firm. Okay, we can't all be doing our full-time jobs and full-time tracking the external world because too much is happening. And in between changing it, the way we do business, we still have to actually do business and make a profit to last until the next accounting year. Okay, so really, really important. Somebody within this firm or some function or some team has to be given the task of understanding what's going on outside and bringing that insight into the organization. Secondly, we cannot wait for certainty, okay? We have to make educated guesses about the future, how it's going to pan out. What can we say now? And if you look at the left and the right of these slides, I think you'll see there's a paradigm shift going on at the moment. Back in the day, we used to feel as if we were living on a plane. Okay, so I was on the left, you were on the right of this road. We were both in business, we were competing. The future seemed limitless, horizon endless. And the job of business people was to race across that road, find natural resources, take them, make things with them, throw away the rest. And the person who got there first won. Okay, and those parallel lines never met. But we now see, moving to the right of the screen, that we live on the surface of a sphere. We are connected. Resources are finite. We are totally codependent. There's nothing that happens. No line on this sphere can go around without meeting another line. We are interconnected. And what follows from this, I think, is that the old linear view of take, make, and dispose is on the way out. We live in a world where the economy has to be circular. The product cycle has to be circular. We cannot take, make, and throw away. And what we're seeing in companies to try and help them get used to this is the heavy use of scenario workshops and scenario analysis. Basically, if you ask yourself, what will the world look like if global warming is limited to 1.5 degrees as an average? What will it look like? What would our product lines, what would our raw materials, what would our demand and our markets and our customers look like in that world? What about if it goes up to 2 degrees? What would it look like? And then I think that creates a platform for urgency for businesses to react and to work out what they will do in different scenarios. So once you made educated guesses using science-based targets and what will have to happen if we are to limit global warming to a manageable level, that should feed through to your strategy right at the top. And this is something for boards and executives to do. It's not something which a gifted junior can come up with. It has to be right from the top. Why? Because when you really think about what the strategic challenges and consequences of sustainability are going to be, you should realize that you have probably misallocated your capital. And you therefore need to reallocate capital. And that kind of really big strategic reallocation of capital has to be done at the board level, because they need to take ownership of the strategy and the risk management approach to deal with the risks that the strategy throws up. So wherever these crucial decisions happen about risk and reward, about capital allocation, that's where the decision and the strategy for sustainability has to be formed. That's the crucible. So if your board and your non-executive directors are not knowledgeable enough, then two things have to happen. Either you get outside help, whether that's consultancy, whether that's bringing in somebody full-time, or those people on your board, they have to go on training courses. They have to become clued up and wise to the changes that we're seeing in the outside world. And somebody making those allocation decisions has to understand the science, the regulations, and the market drivers. Okay, so let's say we have a strategy now. Everybody has a role in participating and implementing that strategy. And if you are if you're a medium to large enterprise, you need, I believe, you need somebody to orchestrate these changes. So in the 12 boxes that you see here, I've taken an example from a finance firm. Different industries will have different details, but many of the functions are the same. So there's the products and the front office function. There's finance, data, communications, internal audit, human resources, risk, and procurement as basic functions. They all need to change what they're doing to implement a sustainable strategy. And somebody needs to make sure that every team speaks to every other team. For example, human resources, they may have insights into how to recruit people for your company based on giving them a worthwhile purpose in life. The data team may need to speak to the front office so that the front office gets regular data on feedback on how the strategy is being implemented. And internal audit may need to speak to change management, just to take two at random, to make sure that all projects and major change initiatives that are now underway are actually meeting the firm's sustainability goals. So there's so many changes. A single person cannot predict or understand everything that needs to change, but they can engage, enthuse, and inspire. Fifthly, and again, here's where I have to delegate, because my knowledge runs out here. Somebody somewhere in your firm has to be innovating products and services, because the changes in technology, in regulations and laws, and in customer preferences, supplier demands are all changing product development. And I've given 3 examples here. One is fairly standard, as you know, so BA. If BA cannot find a way of flying planes without causing immense pollution, its days are numbered. It's a threat. Battery life offers huge opportunities. So the ways of storing energy there are hundreds. It's an amazing article if you want to read this, including just simply dropping things in the ground slowly and then pulling them up. And then the third example here, Deliveroo, is a really crucial reminder that sustainability is not just about climate, important and vital the climate is. So Deliveroo, for those who do not know, is a meal delivery firm in the UK, based in the UK, that did very well during lockdown. It went public a few weeks ago and had a disastrous IPO because investors realized that the business model relied upon paying workers as little as £2 an hour. And that's not sustainable, because sooner or later, your workers will organize and they will strike, or they will take you to court, as happened with Uber drivers in the UK, where the High Court ruled that they were actually not freelancers, they were employees of Uber, and they were qualified to sick leave and holidays. So again, your sustainable strategy needs to take into account the fact that you cannot exploit people and stakeholders indefinitely. Talking of stakeholders, in the new world of stakeholder capitalism, you have to manage all of your stakeholders. And if any of them have a severe grievance against you, that means you're not sustainable. I don't want you to read all of the words here, because this is from a finance example, But just to go across the chapter headings, there is an immense amount of innovation and institutionalization going on by financial and conduct regulators. Investors and rating agencies are demanding much more of firms than they ever did before, partly because they want to be sustainable, and partly because the demand from investors and from the ultimate owners of shares and bonds is for investment in companies that do good, not bad. Thirdly, and I've seen this myself, customers and suppliers, the whole supply chain is becoming focused on a sustainable future, and companies sometimes will not sell to you. I know a bank that refused to lend money to a client because the client didn't disclose enough about its recycling. And to the right of the screen, industry lobby groups and associations, non-governmental organizations, and current and or future prospective staff all need to be convinced that you and your company are part of the solution and not part of the problem. Okay, so we have, as a recap here, we have a strategy. We've implemented it across the business. Everybody's involved. We're looking at outside stakeholders as well as internal stakeholders. Now we need to rethink performance management and reporting, because your definition of success probably needs to be widened. If we look at the old model of capitalism, with the parallel roads stretching off to a plane, the financial performance model was relatively straightforward. You had inputs which you put at current market price. You used them to create outputs. You externalized the unpleasant costs and the refuse, and you sold your outputs at a profit. And the money you made was the difference between your costs and your revenues. You didn't need to think about the outside world or about the long-term effects. But in the world we are entering into, the interconnected, finite, codependent world, you do have to think about your impacts on the wider system. Systems thinking becomes key here. So this poses, I think, probably three big problems, none of which are insoluble, but all of which are tricky. First, the data on green finance, for example, doesn't exist. Nobody can quite decide what counts as green, whether nuclear is green, whether gas is green, whether loans to a nuclear company that's trying to divest out of nuclear are green. So it's not easy, and we're going to have to compromise. But there's an emerging way of accounting for sustainability. Secondly, though, you have to start accounting for what takes place beyond the four walls of your factory or office. And to measure impact on society, you need a common set of metrics. And here, lots of firms that I've seen, and I'm not sure how far it is around the world, but lots of firms I see are using the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and they're saying, okay, how does our firm contribute to a focused subset of these? You can't do everything, but how do they contribute towards a subset? Can we measure the impact that we're having on education or environment or oceans? And once you start to think about these wider impacts, you'll see that your accounting model may need to change. And some companies, Danone springs to mind, have tried to develop new ways of accounting for impact, not just profit and loss. And I think those will, we will watch these and see which ones become the default. But that's a space that has to grow. Oops, let me just admit. Okay, so we have to be prepared to disclose a lot more about what goes on inside our companies. Why? Well, partly to convince stakeholders, but also because once you start on this process of saying, I'm going to try and do good, you set off a chain reaction. And this cycle shows you how. So first of all, you may be called upon to publicly state the purpose and beliefs of your company. For example, do you believe in science-based targets? Do you believe in climate change? Do you believe in sustainability? If you say yes, the next question you'll be asked is, okay, well, how have you turned that into your business strategy? Because if there's a gap between what you say and what you do, that makes you a hypocrite, yeah? So once you've got a strategy, the next question is, okay, tell us how you have embedded it into business as usual processes. And then once you've got a process, the next question could be, are your incentives aligned to your purpose? Do people get rewarded for pursuing what you tell them is the right thing to do? Or are they incentivized in the old way to take, make, and dispose? And then are performance measures disclosed? If you are incentivizing performance, are you willing to disclose the outputs of that process? You say you want to reduce X and increase Y. How much have you reduced X and increased Y? And by the way, has your audit department or external auditors, have they signed off your numbers? Or is this a feeble attempt at greenwashing? So you can see this normative cycle starts with a public espousal of a belief or a statement, and then can ratchet up the demands on what you disclose. Until, and I know that some firms now, the director of finance is now almost the director of performance, and performance is the total social output of a firm, rather than simply the profit and loss. So depending on where you're at, where your industry is, the size and scale of your firm, you may not yet be disclosing a lot, but all of the regulation in the UK, the Europe, and the US is, and also Asia Pacific, is pushing towards more and more disclosure as a tool for I guess social engineering, and I think that trend is going to continue. Okay, governance, my favorite topic. But it's really important here. So if we imagine that you've got a strategy and you've got an engaged workforce, you do need to rethink what you optimize your governance. Where does it make sense to set up the checks and the balances? Who takes control? Who's in charge of reviewing decisions and allocations of capital? And as so many different functions change, the terms of reference and the mandates of your committees need to change as well. I won't go through all of the small wording on these slides because it's a little bit in the weeds. But but just to say, you want control over decision makers, and you also want sustainability taken into account in all decisions, and to make sure that the widest range of perspectives and insight is factored into the decisions as they are taken. Finally, the 10th step in my little 10-step journey is to recharge your workplace culture. So the culture won't work, your strategy won't work unless your culture supports that strategy. So ask yourself the hard questions, and ask your colleagues as well. What does it really take to succeed in an organization like yours, or even in your firm? What kind of behaviors does it take to get to the top? Is your firm incentivizing the right behaviors from a sustainability standpoint? And are your actions aligned with words? And the 5 ways that we recommend at Deloitte that people try to change culture are shown to the right of this slide. They are ways to communicate desired behavior. So starting at the top, role models is the easiest to describe. It's what the top people do. It's what the leaders do. What they are seen doing and seen to succeed by. And there's also the explicit kind of enculturation that people receive when they are recruited. Even in the interview stage, induction, the rule books, training, staff manuals, and policies. Explicitly told, this is what we want to do. But incentives are also an incredibly important way of communicating culture. What do you actually reward people for doing? What are the financial and non-financial rewards? And what happens when people don't behave as you wish? Do they suffer any adverse consequences? The last 2, I think we're getting slightly less clear, but they're very important. Revealed preferences. People pick up on what you do, not just what you say. And if there's a gap between what you do and what you say, they will follow what you do, not what you've said. And they will also therefore believe that what you say doesn't count. So reveal preferences, vital in spreading culture. And then finally, never underestimate the symbolic power of an anecdote told well. I will always remember the bank I used to work for, the head of operational risk used to jump through the turnstiles and not show his security pass. What do you think that did for the culture of showing security passes at that organization? So I've taken you through a whistle-stop tour now. That's the end of my presentation. I'm just going to zip back up to the top 10 and see if there are any questions. And before I go into questions, let me just say, please, if you found anything in this useful, ask me for the presentations. I will give you them, spread them, change them, adapt them as you see fit. We live in a codependent, finite world where if I can help you to help me, to help them, we all get better. So thank you very much. I hope I haven't gone over my time, and I'm handing back now to the invigilator.